Here we go. So we got a great guest on today in the Husky Huddle. Back for our third episode of this. Last week we had on the great Kyle Muncy to talk what's going on there with branding and all that kind of stuff. And now we have a fantastic alumni, one of the stars of the. I guess you were. Were you? Did you also play under? You were under Holtz, right? Because
I was Holt's first year, and then when he left, I left. So Holtz is my only coach.
So Holtz was okay. Okay, so
Yep.
you were. So your class was. Were you Stafford and
Correct? Yeah. We were 94, the incoming class, his first class there. I mean, I was a walk on, but I still consider myself a part of the class with Marcus Campbell, Phil Hunt, Kevin Foster, Pat Russo,
right.
Carl Bond. Oh God, now you're gonna make me. But yeah, Shane Stafford. So quite a few. Phil Hunt.
Phil Hunt. Yeah.
Ernie Lowe. Butch Parmalee.
Butch Parmalee.
Yeah.
So you were a part of the really great team that went to the semifinals. You guys lost in it was quarterfinals to the eventual champion, right? Georgia Southern.
Well, no,
they lost that year. They lost
to UMass, who we beat twice. Yeah,
that's right. Because all right, so that's when UMass, and we're going back in history now here.
Yeah.
So that's when UMass. Who did they have there? Marcel Shipp. No,
Marcel Shipp. Yep.
Was the running back there? Okay. Mm-hmm. So and was that's really interesting. Okay. So that's when they won, and the coach of UMass at the time,
Mark Whipple.
Who's the coach? Yes. Okay. So he went back there for a few years back when they went Division I as well. So that was Mark Whipple. Mark Whipple, I remember from when I first came. This is how I was introduced to Mark Whipple, by the way. So when I first came to UConn, my first year, a few years before you, we played New Haven and I was redshirting. Yeah, New Haven beat us in a close game, and Mark Whipple was the head coach of New Haven at the time. Mm-hmm. That was kind of like the launching pad, and he was running the run and shoot, mm-hmm. with a running back released and caught passes, ran the ball. I don't know if that's what he ran at UMass back then too.
Yeah, the whiplash they called it, back then. I got a funny story about University of Haven. As you know, I'm a Connecticut guy, right? So UNH is right down the road. Their football team back in the day, I mean, they had Roger Graham, who was a great running back in the day. I think he got a little run with the Cowboys. But those guys were huge. I remember my buddies played baseball down there, and I think we had like a week off in 94. You have a week, your bye week or something like that. I went home, and my buddies took me to a party with these guys. Now, mind you, I wasn't the size I ended up being, but those guys were enormous. And my buddies were like, yeah, these guys are all former D1 talents. They just didn't have the grades to go D1. Those guys were enormous.
They were. Roger Graham was the running back when they beat it when I was a redshirt. So it was I was like, who is this guy running wild? He was running wild in that game. But it was interesting. Then, of course, I was thinking, what am I doing here? But obviously it ended up all working out really well. But it's interesting to talk UConn football because I think UConn football is at like a crossroads in the program where because of what's going on in college football right now with NIL and transfer portal and conference realignment, they're at a crossroads because basketball obviously is widely successful in the Big East, and UConn football is in the land of independence. Trying to figure that whole process out. It's really interesting to see because 2 years ago, obviously, Coach Moore had a really good year. Well, I think they went to a bowl game.
They went to the Myrtle Beach Bowl. And then last year was a tougher year. This year, supposedly, there's I just was reading. They have 6 gigantic offensive linemen between transfers and guys that were back. To lead that offensive line. So they're hoping they have the ability to run the ball like they did a couple of years ago when they really ran the tail off the football on their way to going to a bowl game. And defensively, suppose they got a newer, some new strategy there to really start to kind of take advantage of the players that they do have and maybe some of the limitations that they have maybe athletically relative to some of the other teams they might play. So it's really interesting that he's trying to kind of figure out how to transform it. You're in Connecticut. And I always say that you really like do a great job of being in somewhat of the know of UConn football over the years. Being in Connecticut, that helps. That like, what are some of the things that you've seen? In these last year or two that with when the more era that's changing.
You know what? It's you've used a good point phrase in the this is like we're at a crossroads right now as a program, and I won't say who told me, but someone we both know who's in the know said this is the most important year for UConn football, right? Because we are independent, and Steve has said it over and over on this podcast. The program is bleeding money. We're still in the red, right? And we're not going to be in the black until we get into a major conference and get some of that TV revenue. So that being said, I'm optimistic. Talking to some of the older alumni, older than us,
Right.
they're very pessimistic. But I look at the schedule, right? It's very winnable. I heard you and Steve talk about it. We got to at least get 7 or 8 wins to even think about how this program is going to survive or not. Because I think that's where we are, Dave. I mean, eventually they're going to say, is it worth it financially, economically to keep this program afloat? I hope it doesn't, but I think, they have to run the football, but yet they need to be a little more creative on offense. Sure. I'm sick of seeing, third and long, screen right, screen left. It's just, I think Marcus Campbell and I were talking about that last week. It's just, they need definitely be more creative. They've been out there in the portal. Like you said, they got a few transfers in. Quarterback is going to be interesting. They got the kid from Maine. Also, they transfer from Wisconsin. So I'm not sure who's got the leg up on the job there.
Right.
So I think their ability on offense is going to determine how successful we're going to. I think defense will be fine, so.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Like, you got to be able to score in today's football, especially, in the conference, the non-conference kind of thing where they're independent. A lot of those games could be high-flying scoring games, and you can take advantage of that because you have multiple different opponents, and you could probably put some points on the board if you open it up. And I think it's funny because in the old days you had a lot more instances of freezing cold in New England, and the weather. I don't know. It's like I know in New Jersey, like it's been relatively mild the last few years for the most part in the fall until you get late, really, really late. But that's expected. But I think that's to your advantage to be able to open up the offense. And I think that's something that we have to start to take advantage of. Like, we can't assume that we're going to have the advantage of cold weather to be able to run the ball at some point, because October's not like that really anymore. It's kind of now, could you have any instance of it? Sure. But you for the most part, October's fairly mild. And, it's not till you get towards mid-November that it really starts to change dramatically. And I think that's a big thing. All the offenses now that have an opportunity to really score a lot of points, give their teams a chance to succeed. It doesn't mean you're going to win a championship because you have a great offense, but the offenses help you win ball games, I think, in college football. And I think that's a big thing that UConn has to kind of take that next step on. I agree with you on that. And defensively, you can do things. You got to get important stops, obviously. But if you face a great quarterback, even in the independent conference that we have, you face a good quarterback, he's going to put points on the board, right? Because you're going to get matchups, and offensive coordinators now are really, really astute in the passing game and creating space and matchups and getting numbers to the ball. So they have an advantage at all times over the defense. So even if you have really good defensive play, unless you are significantly outmatching the other team size-wise, which you see maybe obviously the SEC schools, if they play a lower level opponent, or the Big Ten schools, if they play a lower level opponent, if you're not significantly outmatching them, people can find the matchup that can help you be successful in offense. And I think that's one of the things that UConn has to really improve. Quarterback plays a big deal. Like, we had Taquan Robertson transferring last year from Penn State, and he's a New Jersey guy, and he was a star in New Jersey, and he didn't really pan out at Penn State, and came over by us. They were hopeful. It did not work out, and I think he transferred out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But, it didn't work out. I think he was injured. He was supposed to be a dual threat, but the passing skills were really, to me, not on the level that was needed to be successful. at least with what we were doing. But it was kind of the same thing he showed at Penn State, you know. And I think that's a big thing in recruiting that UConn has to continue to do. Like with transfers, it's important to know, okay, what did these guys struggle with at their former school, and don't bring in a guy to try and do something that he struggled with at his former school. I think that's a big thing. You know, we have to make sure that we capitalize on the guys that can transfer in and have it. I think linemen are really a good opportunity, especially offensive linemen, because if you go to the Big Ten, there's plenty of offensive linemen that are capable of being really, really successful at what the level that we're currently playing at, right? And then hopefully that can launch us into another conference if we're successful there. What are your thoughts there?
I think going back to the offense, we need an identity. You know, we don't have. I don't know what the hell they are. Really, I really don't. As far as like, it's you know, when I hear you talk about like offenses, like, you know, Alabama, they have an identity. Okay, they're you know, Penn State, they have an identity. They have a game plan of what they want to do. I think we need to establish that, and we need to get some consistency. I can't tell you how many offensive coordinators UConn's had in the past 4 years. I mean, I think we roll through a different one every year. I mean, that's the first problem. We need consistency, and we need to have an identity. But yes.
What do you think the identity should be from an offensive?
You know, without me knowing the personnel, what we got,
right,
I mean,
right.
I know we got the kid from Michigan. So if we got some hogs in there, I mean, then yeah, maybe we should be able to run the ball. But again, that threat of the pass needs to be there. You know, the days of ground and pound in Division I football, I think, are done. I don't know what team successfully, and I'm trying to think right now, all the top teams, they all throw the football.
Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan. Yeah, but they're still balanced. You know,
I think balance is the key.
Yeah.
So I think running the obviously you can win with a wide open passing game. You can win with a powerful running game, but I think balance is the key. I think that's what Michigan had that's successful, because you can take advantage of the fact that people have. Now I don't know if that's the same at what we're playing. If I'm looking at like, you know, Big Ten play, SEC play, maybe even ACC play. If they're bringing in a lot more guys that can run really well, and because they got to cover the pass, maybe you don't have as many guys at the linebacker or safety position that can take on the run. So that's why I think Michigan was very effective with that balance attack, because personnel-wise, you could take advantage of smaller guys being in there with some of the spread sets and use like an H-back. So it looks like, you know, or use it like a tight end as your lead, and use him as a lead blocker and make it look like you have that threat of pass all the time and be able to run and take advantage of your bigger linemen. So I do agree that balance attack, I think, for UConn is if they can achieve that with an effective passing game, they have to, but they have to have much more spread principles in some, like you can show tighter type sets and still run a lot of the wide open stuff. And that's one of the things that's always confused me over the years, watching them in like recent memory. It's like, okay, like the whole stadium knows you're running when you're in this set, and the whole stadium knows you're passing when you're in this set. Like there's and you see so many teams do it, right? So it's not like this is rocket science. Why do we not start to intertwine those two things? Show like it's more run. You could still run spread pass, because all these the really good offensive coordinators that I've seen at in college, they leverage that so well. They'll make it look like we're coming downhill right now, and they're releasing 5 guys, okay, and they're doing play action off of that, and you're getting guys wide open, even if you're getting guys wide open on the edges down the field. So I think that's one of the things. I think you're right. Creativity leads to that, right? And the more you're playing that chess game of when you're expected to run, you're passing, and I'm not talking about down and distance situations, but why do we want to be in 3rd and 6 all the time? You know, like, okay, run, get 3. Oh, they stop us. We run, we get 1, 3rd and 6. Are we passing? Of course we're passing. Oh, we run a screen play. That was our wrinkle, instead of running back screen instead of throwing the ball down the field. And I think the skill kids are so much better in catching the ball and route running, even the backs, right? Because they all do 7-on-7 now. They all do. They all have
that's all you're allowed to do sometimes in practice. Yeah,
that's right. And they all have trainers, right? Like they all, like even kids who didn't, in the old days, you had kids who had a lot of money were able to go to trainers and stuff like that. Now they all do because they're always working groups and stuff. What I've noticed is like even kids who don't really have a lot of money, like they get in with a group, trainer lets them in, you know what I mean? So there's lots of opportunities. And I just see it from my area. So every kid has the opportunity to really kind of get work, even if they're not working on their own, they're working with somebody. And they're so much better at the skill portion. I'm not saying they're better. Tackling is probably worse, right? But things like pure skill-based things. So there's no reason not to like be diversified in your offense because all of your kids, the only difference is how fast are they versus at UConn maybe versus, I don't know, Ohio State, right? So maybe their 40 isn't the same or whatever, but maybe you have a guy that's a 6'5" guy that you can take advantage of, which they do. They do have some of those guys. Is there a like, what is it? So you said like the older guys are pessimistic, which has always been my experience with the older guys as well. Knowing a lot of the UConn alumni that are old guys, and my experience with the younger guys, in your group and beyond, it's probably a mixed bag, like depending on what era they came from. Like your era obviously was very successful. So you've seen what can happen. Steve Cully's era was the beginning of a lot of success with Edsel. So those guys are optimistic of what can happen. Then the 2010s was the big dip. So I'm sure a lot of those guys are like, of the era like that we were like hamstrung or we didn't have the opportunities. So it's kind of a mixed bag. What role does the alumni have in this whole process?
Great
question. Do they have a role? I mean, I'm curious.
I think it's just showing support and being there for the team. And I think, one thing about Mora is that he had, when he first came on a couple of years ago, he had that a Zoom call, with all the former alumni, which was awesome. I've never done that before. So they got to keep us involved. We need to just and be a voice, out there and show support. Show support in the away games, travel well, and help when we can as far as this whole UConn collective. I know people like Mike Burton, Tommy Collins are doing a great job, Robert Braswell. Those guys have been, helping out financially. And I know not everyone can do that financially, but I just think we need to do a better job of just staying connected with one another and showing support with the program. That's
what is the collective working on? Because I don't really know that much about what the collective does.
I mean, with the whole NIL things and things like that. So, like that kid from Wisconsin.
Have they raised a lot of money
I think, to my knowledge, yeah. I mean, because it started off from nothing, and then those guys got together and are really, really trying to build it up, So,
got it.
We had that event, the spring weekend, now it's not a game anymore. It's more of a showcase, right? But the alumni came, and some of those recruits that they were trying to get, people were talking to them on the side, talking to recruits and said, hey, you should come here. So people are actually making an effort and reaching out to people, we're behind the scenes talking to people. It's like, hey, this guy's, he needs a job for the summer. Who do we know? We're using our resources because God knows basketball does it.
Yes.
Some of the UConn guys, basketball guys, to my knowledge, they all have state jobs, because they look out for one another,
Absolutely. And the collective. So the UConn football collective is is this thing a separate collective from the overall are they separated out or is like,
I believe so. I don't have that much knowledge to it, Mike Burton or Tommy Collins probably, or even Steve would be better, but
right.
But I know they're trying to help with getting some of these recruits to come, because it's all about now, what can you give me? What can you provide?
Well, that's what it is. And that's the toughest part too. Like, I think that's the same thing that like UMass struggles with. Boston College probably struggles with a little bit as well. And it's kind of like a thing where a lot of the players that played, at UConn without that direct connection for over this time and being in a conference, it's been hard for them to draw a straight line. And probably the guys who have, I would say, the most financial success or the resources to get to guys that have the most financial success are guys probably older than even me, right? So, mid 50s to late 60s, right? So that's the group that because they've just been building their businesses and working longer and have more time to be successful from a financial standpoint, right? So and you get more masses of those people, but that's the thing I think that we have to continue to like figure out how we do that. I think football has to and Steve Cully's doing a great job of that with the Husky Talk. And we're trying to do this with the Husky Huddle, like talk more football stuff and talk, maybe answer some of the tougher questions and try to or ask the tougher questions, because we want like the administrators to ask these questions. We want the athletic director Benedict to start to ask, like, what else can we do to start making these things happen? Because the money that's available in football is so huge. And if you're not taking advantage of it, you're really hurting your athletic. So UConn basketball obviously makes money, but UConn football is not going to make any money and loses a tremendous amount of money. Meanwhile, if you're in some of these conferences, you're making 10, 20, $30 million a year profit to be able and much more. I mean, I don't know. Some of these programs are billion-dollar programs almost. So
whoever that Rutgers AD is who got them into the Big Ten, several years ago, I think she's not there anymore. But there should be a statue of her, because no matter how bad they are, how bad they stink, they will always be in the black, because they'll guess what? They share in that TV revenue.
And they made a brilliant move, convincing Schiano to come back. So he's able to recruit at a different level. But the conference is the most important thing. If he wasn't in the conference, he wouldn't be able to recruit. No. But he's in that conference, so now he's recruiting. And he has right now a top 10 national class. It doesn't mean that he'll stay that way, but he's got a top 10 national class. He did something that I thought was so interesting. And I don't, I'm not close, and I'm starting to learn to get closer to what UConn's doing from this standpoint. But Schiano had a big official visit weekend the first week of June. Okay, he would like beat everybody else to the punch in the country, and he had like all the kids on the official visit, and he got all these commitments out of it, which boosted his class. Which means even if he loses a couple of those guys over their senior year, like someone else entices him with some more money, he's still gonna have a fantastic class, right? And I thought it was a brilliant move. That would not have been Schiano's move, first round Schiano, back when they used to play Edsel back in the Big East days, right? He really innovated in that move there, and that was, I think, a really, really well played thing, because you have to do those kind of things. Like, one of the things I always say is, like, UConn, every one of these top kids, they should be offered. You know what I mean? Every one of these kids who you project is going to be a 3-star player. You know who they are, but they want to evaluate them at camp and all that kind of stuff. Man, offer them, recruit them, and they tell you no, and get on those guys as early as humanly possible, right? Because I just think that creates an opportunity. And you know what? Yeah, are you gonna get turned? It's like sales, Are you gonna get turned down a lot more than you're gonna win? Absolutely, you are. But maybe you get a couple of those guys. Maybe a Dan Orlovsky comes your way, right? And you don't. It's funny. You need a quarterback, right? You can build offensive linemen, which I think they're starting to do. They've had success. Guys go to the pros in the offensive line. I think, I think you can get, as you can get linemen in the Northeast. There's states that you can really get them from, and then you can find them in pockets in different places. But I think that you have to figure out how the skill impact guys, how you can get a couple of those guys each year that are really, truly difference makers. And I think that's a hard thing. It's like, because otherwise you're grinding up the field. I mean, and you're really, even if you're passing, you're grinding up the field because there's not a guy that can get to the end zone now, right? And maybe that's I'm just spitballing, but maybe that's a 5'9" guy. Back when I was there, like a Dak Newton, you know what I mean? Like, doesn't fit the profile, right? But really can stretch the field, right? And he's a difference maker, okay? And he can get into the end zone, and that complements a Carl Bond, right? Who's going to catch a lot of balls for you. You know what I mean? He's going to have 1,100 yards receiving, right? But you have that one guy in your team that's averaging 23 yards a catch, and I think that I always thought Holtz kind of got that. I thought he kind of understood that mix. Like you're going to have the guy that is going to move you down the field, and then you're going to have a home run guy. And he had that good mix. And you don't need a ton of those home. The misnomer is that, like, Georgia has a home run guy all over the place, right? Ohio State has a home run guy all over the place. You need all these home run guys. You need guys that can gain the yards that are really, really. And in today's offensive passing game, you could do this. Move up guys that can move up the field with and get you lots of first downs. And then you need a guy that can quick strike home run. And Holtz, I always thought understood that well. I think Randy Edsall understood that first round for the most part.
Yep.
Second round, I kind of want to give him a pass because it was just in like shambles at that point. And he probably went like this. What am I going to do? It's like a complete – I don't think he thought that maybe when he got in there. And then when he got in there pretty quickly, he was like, whoa, this is like not exactly what I came into first round.
Let me ask you something, and not to change the subject, but going back to at the end of Edsall when he left to go to Maryland, right? I remember, you remember this, but we were talking on Facebook. This is when the ACC was about to pick Louisville or UConn, and I was complaining because I'm a traditionalist being here. Like I didn't want to see traditionalist Big East basketball affected or just that whole Big East conference. And you're like, they have to go, or else they won't have a conference. And guess who won the pony? You were they chose Louisville, and then we're in the AAC, and we've been looking down ever since, So where do you think we screwed up? Was it? I know we didn't have the best relationship with BC back in the day. I know Calhoun kind of made a comment when BC went to the ACC. We didn't, and I know Hathaway wasn't. Where do you think we screwed up there?
I think it was foresight because. If you remember, and I hate to use Rutgers, they were kind of our like mirror at that time, right?
Right.
In the Big East, like we kind of had a little mini rivalry with Edsall the first round. Like we won a couple, and then they won. It was like, and that's when Rutgers had the really good teams, and we had some really good teams. And the reason why I just only reason because I heard Schiano say this at a coaches conference in New Jersey when he came back. He said he left because he was so heartbroken basically that they didn't get into, I think at the time maybe it was the ACC but whatever it was. I don't remember if it was Big Ten or ACC, but it was one of the big conferences. They didn't get in initially, and he was heartbroken by that, and he left. And then event that the AD who you said that ended up getting him in there a few years later, they ended up getting in there to the Big Ten, but he was heartbroken. That's why he left, right? He kind of like he just thought, I'm never gonna get to where I need to, you know what I mean? And that's why he jumped to the NFL. And he said it was kind of, in retrospect, it was kind of a mistake, but he really was he was heartbroken, right? And we felt that way when that same exact thing happened, because it was the same time period. That was a huge opportunity. And I don't remember who the AD was at the time. I think it was the post Lou, because Lou would have got us in.
Had to be Hathaway.
It had to be Hathaway.
Yeah.
And I think that was the beginning and the end for Hathaway, even though he was Lou's right-hand man, and he was a great person, Jeff Hathaway, great person. But you needed that Lou Perkins presence to get you in there. And I think that was a big part of it. I think that it was a failure of foresight. And Schiano felt that was the failure of foresight by the university in Rutgers in that thing, because he was pushing for it, and he probably had a better push than we did, to be honest. Like, because they eventually got there after him, but we're stuck in, and I don't know how you get out of this. We're stuck in the Big East thing. We're stuck in basketball needs to succeed. No doubt. Hurley is amazing for the university, right? I mean, obviously Gino Ariema over these years has been amazing for the university. You could argue that football has some of its opportunities because of those guys. I would not disagree with it at all. What I would say is, where do we go for the future, though? What happens? in the future. What happens if the Big East gets dismantled again? What happens if some of those Catholic schools that are in that conference, or those religious schools that are in that conference, do not succeed enough financially and they have to do something different, right? And I don't know if that's a large issue. What if they decide we don't want any football playing schools in this conference, right? So there's a lot of things that can happen, and the way everything keeps moving around, if you get left out, because what eventually is going to happen, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, I eventually think that all the top tier schools are going to be one division. I'm talking like, the ACC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, right? One division, whoever those schools are, all in one division for football, making oodles and oodles of cash. And they'll still be, it'll be like one A, one AA, one AAA, right?
Right.
And the one AAA is like, the CAA, right? That's like the one AAA. But it'll be a one kind of AA. I don't know if they'll use those terms, but there'll be a second tier. And if you're in that second tier, it's going to be very low opportunities to be financially successful in your athletic department. You're going to be, I don't want to use Georgia Southern as an example, but that's what you're going to kind of be like. You're going to be like a Georgia Southern who treads water financially from year to year, right? And yes, they're pretty good in football, but they can't fund all the programs the way that it needs to be. And even places like Central Florida might be in a predicament from that standpoint. Even though they've had some wild success in the last few years, if they don't get into one of those kind of conferences, and UConn could be in one of those issues. And then the question is, do we continue to do football, or just, if we're going to lose money, if we're going to lose $2 million a year or $5 million a year, are we better off at one AAA back in the old CAA? I mean, versus not being, you got to get to that. You got to do whatever it takes to get to that one of those big conferences. And big UConn basketball will thrive even more, because here's what I believe is going on in basketball. Hurley, the man,
he's the key.
Hurley,
yeah,
is phenomenal. But what happens if Dan Hurley goes? Okay, which almost happened this year. Okay, with the Lakers, right?
Shocked. Yeah, I was shocked he stayed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he's a college guy, but who knows if down the line, someone really comes in and said, now he doesn't need the money per se, but you never know. Like, someone comes in and all, because these contracts keep coming up, a Texas, because they're getting so much money in football. A Texas or an Alabama says, listen, we want you to win championships here. Here's $100 million. You know what I mean? Do the best you can to do that, right? And you're going to have all the money that you need to do that. Now, Hurley right now is content, but the guy's a competitor. You know what I mean? He wins a third championship. If he does win a third championship,
it's on to the next challenge. I hear you.
Yeah, he's such a competitor. Like, do you want another challenge? Now, listen, Jim Calhoun was not like that, right? But Jim Calhoun also wasn't making the money that these guys could make. Like, there's no comparison between the money. Now, Hurley's an amazing coach. So my point of that, all of that, is the Gino Auriemma era at some point will come to an end. Okay, the Hurley
5 years.
Era, yeah, Hurley era.
Contract, yeah.
Agreed. The Hurley era may or may not come to. I don't know the man, so I don't know what's in his head, but. Do we want to put all our eggs into that basket and not have a net, right, where we could continue to attract coaches? Because let's say Hurley does leave. Okay, so how do we attract the next Hurley without the capabilities financially to attract the next Hurley? I mean, listen, if Hurley wasn't so into being a college coach, he would have taken the money and went to the Lakers, So, And that becomes the thing more and more. What do we do there? Because I think it's a major issue that I think we're trying to address. But basketball, it's going to be very hard because if you're a basketball guy, why would you don't need to have foresight. Like the only time that you said you went to another conference was that AAC nonsense, and it was the end of Kevin Ollie's program when that happened. Like he had won a national championship. It was starting to become the end of Gino Ariema's program because he wasn't getting the same recruits. People can say whatever they want. Like that conference did not hold the same weight with recruits. So did Gino Ariema change very much? No. He's doing a little bit better again because of the fact that he's back in the Big East. And we have to realize that as great as the Big East is, those teams that are in there now, it's good for recruiting basketball. But I mean, it's not great. It's not it is not. There's some really good teams. There's 2 or 3, 4 a year, but in the long run, the SEC, the Big 10, maybe the Big 12, maybe the AC, they're going to have so much more money to get more better players. So what we have right now in the Big East is not going to be sustainable in the same capacity because eventually you see it. Alabama's great in basketball. Alabama used to not be any good in men's basketball. They're now great. Well, why are they great? I mean, it's not a basketball state. Why are they great? Well, because they have the ability to pay for coaches and players to be able to get next level guys. Okay?
Right. And it's the assistant coaches too that they could do. They take some of that money, give it to the assistants, which UConn has a limited budget on that. So
that's a great point. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. For the football side, I was told that their assistant coaches aren't paid very well. He can't keep them. I don't think I heard it on some podcasts. We're not unable to keep these guys. It's just like any company. It's all about what employee retention, right?
That's exactly right. And what can you offer them to be able to retain them? And then the other issue that I think, and I talked a little bit with Steve on this, but the other issue I think that is stadium we have to figure out. We really have to figure out, obviously if we're going to continue to push it with football, is that stadium the answer? And I'm not talking about how nice the stadium is. That's plain. I think if you want to attract the big recruits in the long run, you have to be on campus. The kids that want to play, like how many big time programs don't have stadiums on campus? Not many. Maybe Miami. I mean, that's it. And Miami, by the way, has struggled because of those issues. Like the modern athlete wants everything in one place. That's what they want. What would I mean, if you think about it, even yourself, the thing I actually really, really liked, and I think you might, did you live in Hilltop or did you live in?
I lived in Alumni.
Alumni. Okay. So same thing. So, I was a McMahon, right? Same thing. You could walk across the street, walk 150 yards, and you were at our facilities, right? Even our facilities weren't big time. It was when they showed me McMahon and they said, look there, that's where you're going every day. And I'm like, that's it? Like right to there? I could do that. Like that's great. Like convenience, right? And if you're an athlete, you want that convenience. You want the convenience of the stadium. You want to know that the college students that look up to you are going to be at your games, right? And there's a big thing to it. And the celebrity part, especially for the really, really top tier players, it's just a reality. The celebrity part is reality. And luckily for basketball, because you have a Hurley, who obviously is his own celebrity because of just how good he is, right? Like on the field performance creates a certain level of celebrity, right? But you look at Paige Beckers. Not only is she a celebrity as a player and Nika Mule, right? They also were doing stuff to be able to enhance their brand, and they understood it really well, but they were kind of individual. Like, I don't think that UConn was out there saying, hey, Paige Beckers do this, get involved with this. We have a media, like Clemson has a media center in their football facility. Okay. Coming to the media center. We'll put some things together for you. Like they did that on their own because they had a certain level of fame from the really good players. Nika Mule's an attractive girl. Like, I think that helps, right? And they they understood kind of building their brand. And they're obviously very good basketball players. those kind of things have to start to become more and more important in the football program. Not taking away from the on the field play, that's the most important, but the branding aspect of it, we have to get out of the Cowtown era. You know what I mean? Like we have to get out of that part of it. I think that's a big. Me and Steve have talked about it, and there are people doing it. You know what I mean? But I think that.
And to piggyback off that too is, as a student, I don't want to party on Friday night and then have to take a bus and drive half hour to East Hartford, where I could just roll out, tailgate, and tailgate in the parking lot, or tailgate in my sorority house or frat house, and then walk over to the stadium. Kids like convenience, especially in today's generation. When the stadium came in 2003, it was a shiny new toy. We were all excited. And they did draw some crowds. When Michigan came in, they sold out. When I forgot who else came in there. I think it was
Notre Dame come in there, or
no? Not Notre Dame. No, Notre Dame wouldn't come to that stadium. But any type of they did sell out. But again, now you're right. It's like, what can we do to enhance the fan experience and enhance the player experience? And I think there's something to what you just said there about having that stadium on campus. But the people of Mansfield, what do they always say? Infrastructure, traffic.
Right. And I think that's like Penn State. UConn is like Penn State in that one road in type of thing. Now, Penn State is a much bigger campus than UConn, but they do it. They do it. They do one road in, one road out. And if you ever, I went to football camp there when I was young. Like, I remember driving that whole stretch, and you're just like, wow, like 95,000 people come in here. And you know what? Traffic is traffic everywhere now. So, the old days, honestly, that was certainly true. You know what I mean? But you have traffic on the highways now. You have, at these stadiums. Like when you go to a Giants game, I mean, you can't even move when you're coming off the turnpike, or there's nowhere to go, right? So, so the people who are not involved with going to the game, they understand on 6 Saturdays in the fall, if I don't want to engage this traffic, I'm staying in and watching the game. I'm getting my food, and I don't think it's literally 5 or 6 Saturdays in the whole entire year that you're going to have that. But let's look at other things too, right? Like business wise for the university, concerts. Like you're going to have a handful of concerts a year. You're going to have you can have a lacrosse game in there. You can have your best soccer games in there, right? Because we do have a lot of really good other sports, right? So you could create these one-off opportunities. I think Harvard and Yale does this amazing hockey thing at
wow, yeah. And the hockey team's good now.
Yeah, you could do a big ice thing, right? Like Michigan does that, right?
All the good Connecticut, like Yale's very good hockey team, or Quinnipiac, you could
bring them into that stadium,
a Connecticut Frozen Four type of thing, Well, yeah,
absolutely. But I don't think fans will go into Hartford for that, right? But if it's on a campus, you'll know, okay, 10,000 UConn students are going to be there for that. Okay, great. Now, you're running a hockey event. Okay, now the other 20,000 will be filled in from the other schools just for a hockey event. You'll have 30, 40,000, right? And so, and I think that's the thing. When you have the games in Hartford, you don't start with 10,000 students coming to your game. You start at 0, and you're trying to attract people to come there as an event, right? And that's why you see, to me, the drop in actual number of people attending games. If the team isn't really, really good, it's going to be hard, right, to get them. Even if they're pretty good, it's going to be hard, right? And if they have a losing season, I mean, you saw some of those. It was actually one time, like I would look to see the number of people at the game when they weren't playing well, just to see how low that number would go. I couldn't believe how low it was going, but I was like, can it go lower than 10,000? Which it was. And that's what Temple got into, which Temple did a great job, but they always struggle with this. They'll always struggle with this to the end of time, right? When the new stadium came in for the Eagles, they did a great job of getting a good deal with them that they got in there. And when they had some good teams, they did pretty well there. But now they're struggle again, right? And it's always going to be an issue. And I look at it the same kind of way. Like, we don't even have an NFL team to have like a top tier type stadium, like an NFL team where there's might even draw. So that's where the on campus 40,000 seat stadium is like, and you could build on that too. Like that, look at what Oregon did over. I mean, obviously they have Nike money and all that,
Right.
but Oregon used to be this great stadium that was like 45,000, and they've continued to build around it. We build facilities around it, and Maryland has even done a much better job with that over the years. And I don't think that they have the most advantageous situation, but they've done a better job with that.
They're in the Big Ten,
right?
And
the money comes in,
and they're truly an ACC school. But that money, you can't pass it. You can't pass it down.
You can't pass it. And what happens is, over time, even though they didn't have originally the most advantageous situation because it's such a huge campus and spread apart and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you keep getting that money in, you could do all kinds of things. And it doesn't mean that they have to tear down the stadium that they have in Hartford. You could use that for other things, I mean, I don't know, concerts and, there's a lot of things but building your own stadium on there will make a huge difference. And obviously they probably wouldn't, like, it's kind of cart before the horse. Like, if they built that stadium and they didn't get in the conference, they would feel like they were screwed, right? And if they don't build the stadium, they're not going to get in that conference. Like, nobody, like, let's look at some of these teams in the Big Ten. I mean, does Ohio State want to come into a stadium in Hartford and play UConn? No. They just don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give Michigan credit. They did, but and they had to bring in extra. I think you muted yourself, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that game. They brought in extra stands too, so they turned that 40,000 seat stadium into a 50,000 seat stadium.
No doubt about it. And I think you don't want to have to do that either, right? Like, But yeah, so anyway, I think it's been a really great talk about this. Let's get you on again and talk some more about this kind of stuff. I think it's a to be continued. I got to take my son somewhere.
Gotcha. Hey, well, before we wrap up, what are your three key? I mean, what's your prediction for the season, or where does UConn need to be? At end of the season, all said and done, what would you consider a successful season? I say 7 wins minimum.
I think 7 wins is a very successful season. Mm-hmm. I think if they get to a bowl game, which is 6 wins, I think it is.
Yeah, 6 wins.
If you get to a bowl game, it's I think a mini win. Mm-hmm. I think if they win 8 games, that's the stratosphere that can take them to the next level. Mm-hmm. And anything above it, I think 7 and 6, like 7's good, 6 is good. But 8 is we're paying attention. Maybe we should do some things, and that's one of the things that, like I mentioned, like it's like which is first, like winning, but they got to win. Like they can't have a losing season with the schedule they have. They have a losing season. You're gonna lose that old alumni. They ain't gonna put the money in there. You're gonna struggle to get. You're gonna start to say to yourself, okay, what are we doing here? I don't even know that. Like, I don't think it's Mora's fault if that happens either. It's really just like we're in this holding pattern. But if he wins, maybe we can get out of the holding pattern. Like, I think he's the guy to give us a chance to do that. I do think that. I mean, his name holds a lot. I think players would want to play for him. I just think that there's a lot of factors to it, and we got to get to 8 wins. Like, it's literally we have to be in a bowl game this year. Otherwise, we're going to be set back another 5 years if we're not.
Agreed. Well, I appreciate you having me on, Dave. Looking forward to doing this again. So
no doubt, I'll have you on as much as you want to come on, Courtney. I'll let you go, and it's really been fabulous having you on. We'll talk real soon.
Yeah, all right, man. All right, brother.
All right.